Commission meeting for October 24th, 2018. Please call the roll.
Mr. Cappers.
Here.
Mr. McGarry.
Here.
Mayor.
Here.
Mrs. Mahan.
Here.
Mrs. Snee. Mr. Titterington.
Here.
Mr. Wolke.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, I've asked Mrs. Knight not to give us the minutes for this past session and instead provide the minutes to us next time.
Thank you.
That's so generous of you.
So we don't have any minutes of our last session today. The first thing on the agenda is the Historic District application for 1 East Main Street. The staff have a report.
Yes, sir, we do. The applicant, William Kelly, the owner of Grandpa Joe's Candy Shop, is requesting Planning Commission approval for window signage to be installed at 1 East Main Street. Property is zoned B3 Central Business District. Property is located on the north side of East Main Street in the first block of the public square. OHI form listed property is originally built in 1855. This is a Victorian Italianate building with shaped hood molds and stone seals, along with dormers with semicircular 4 lights and decorated hoods. Unfortunately, Mr. Kelly couldn't be here this afternoon for this application, but the applicant is requesting to install vinyl window graphics to the existing windows to display their business name and logo in their colors. The building is permitted to have signage for the first floor. The applicant is occupying the main corner of the building on the front corner. The request is for the installation of the business name, which is up to 5 street-facing windows. They're going to alternate between the windows. So one will be with the name, one will be blank, and then so on and so forth, along with a red and white striping at the top in 10 inches. And I passed out a printout showing the actual blue and red that is going to be used, in the blue being the name, Grandpa Joe's, the red being in the red and white striping along the top of the windows. The code for the blue is 0076C0, the red being FF0000. The printout is in CMYK, which is also, I have a printed version in vinyl, which is also through the CMYK. The reds match. This blue is a little bit different, but it was mainly printed mainly for the red, so you can see what the red would look like.
So is it going to be that blue or this blue?
It's going to be that blue on that handout. This one printed out darker. Staff recommends approval based on the proposed sign. It meets all the sign code requirements, and the sign complements the existing colors of the building, which is predominantly black and white.
Okay, I'll start the questioning. The handout you gave us here
Yes, sir.
shows in red the building, as I understand it.
Correct.
But what you're saying is that it's not going to, the awnings, it's not going to be on the entire building. It's just going to be on these windows as you've depicted here.
That is
So the back portion of the building is not going to have this on there. Is that correct?
correct. The only portion that the red and white and the blue name logo will be on the windows, nothing else. Won't be on the awning, won't be on the brick, won't be in the alley.
No, I'm sorry. There are windows back in this building farther back towards in the corner.
Correct.
Where the
Yeah,
red-
it stops just,
Stops right here.
Stop right.
well, there's a few extra windows it would be on. You have RU Juicery in the very back corner, close to the
Right.
alley. They're staying in that space.
Without this representation?
Correct.
Okay.
And then you have a door for the upstairs access.
Right.
And then you have another door, which I believe will be locked or used as maybe a rear entry for this business, and that's where the red and white will start.
Okay.
So it looks like it's one more panel than what's depicted here.
Yeah, they didn't have a really good way to show that in the short amount of time.
Okay.
Because
So that's
the
just,
door looks like it's right there on
I have a streetscape photo that I included that you can actually see the windows, and Troy Community Works portion of the building that they have the storyboards in. Yes, sir, the bottom picture. That's where the red and white would actually start, and there are blue logos.
Okay. Thank you.
And again, the blue would alternate. The red and white would be on each one.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? Any other comments?
Mr. Mr.
Yes,
President,
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Chair, Mr. President, Your Highness.
That's fine. Czar would be fine.
Czar would be fine. Yeah, I am all for vitality of our downtown, and certainly there's some history with a candy store in our downtown, and so I'm all for that vitality of our downtown and small business. I went down there and I sat on one of the new benches, well, repainted benches, and I was looking at the quadrants. I just have some issue with the color scheme of red and white as a border. I just don't see it as a fit for our downtown. It strikes me as our discussion that we had across from the post office with that signage, and this is even closer. This is part of our downtown. Again, I'm not opposed to the vitality of downtown and having a candy store. I think it's good. And I have no trouble with the window signage. But I do have some issue with the brightness of a red and white in the downtown area. It just doesn't seem to be a fit for me. That's my opinion.
I think you're correct in your recollection of what used to be the UDF station.
Right.
They came to us with that type of red, I believe, and we asked them to mute it, and we approved the muted red. I believe that was the case.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Taylor.
So, yeah, I was kind of knee-deep in the Quick Mart, is that what it's called? Discussion. And as I recall it, the first picture that we received was, the background was red and against white.
It was
Or-
a white background with red lettering. So then they flipped it to a red background and white lettering, so it wasn't quite as.
Okay. So when we look at this one, you're talking about 10-inch blocks, basically 10-inch squares alternating between white and red. How tall are the windows?
They are right at 5 feet tall.
5 feet, so 60 inches, so 1/6 of the window is going to be that striping, if you will.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what color, so across the street, the vault sign has red in it. I guess that's kind of a darker red, a little bit darker.
Possibly a little bit darker, but the awnings themselves are also red.
Okay, and the Redmond building, what color red is that? Is that a brighter red than this, or?
That's a fairly bright red on a dark gray background.
I mean, I,
And then we have Dish Network.
because it's
around
only
the
10
corner.
inches, if it was a primary sign, I agree, it would be pretty stark. The building next to it, is the one next to it, the pink building,
Yeah.
the old pink house?
There will be, there is a vacant tenant space between where the candy shop and the Oasis Olive building, the purplish
Oh,
pink.
Where the karate place
Green
is.
will be.
Martial arts was there before.
Yeah, where martial arts was at. So there will be a vacant space in between those two.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff or comments?
Is it being suggested that we go with a more muted color, or what's the suggestion?
Well, I'd like to be a more aesthetically pleasing to the downtown look as it is today. They're more, this, again, I'm not saying I think it's great that we got a storefront coming in. It's great that it's a candy store. I mean, there's nothing with that. I just have an issue with the brightness of the color scheme and how that's going to be bordered all the way from one corner down on that quadrant. And I just went down and sat and just kind of visualized what I thought might look like in comparison to what's there now. If it was toned down, probably be a better fit. Now, I understand candy is bright colors and all that. And I understand all that. And I can understand why they would like to have that. But I know we had issues with a couple blocks down, over color. And this is in town, this is downtown, so my opinion. I like the concept, I like the business, I just wish they would consider toning down the red.
Did you want to make a motion to that effect or not?
I'd like to hear from everybody, that's my opinion.
Well, I guess as Sue could probably testify, aesthetics is not my strong point. But it falls on us to make a decision on this. To me, if I'm thinking, if I'm imagining what a candy store would look like in 1880, I'm imagining something like this. Now, I granted, that doesn't blend in with what it looks like today. And again, I'm a little concerned about making a decision on my aesthetic value, which I have very little of.
I guess being on planning commission and some of the times, especially with reds, we've gotten, we thought one kind of red color and it turned out to be a different red color. Now I'm looking at this, which is one of the reasons we went to this. We wanted to see for sure what kind of color of red, but red seemed to be an issue. And I don't know, I'd hate to stand in the way of progress for the downtown, for Troy Community Works and all that. That's not my issue. My issue is just how will that look in comparison to the totality of the downtown. Even the mural is toned down that we've had for years.
I don't see a problem, but the size of it, pretty small. Where it's located, it's tucked back in. I think it looks very nice. Red, white, and blue as well. So, I personally think it looks fine.
I kind of agree with Mike in the sense it's very bold, and I'm not a good judge of the aesthetics, particularly in the color range, but my first impression is it's almost too bold. I don't have anything to counter that though, but with a recommendation that, what would look better. Is it possible, is this something where they can emulate, necessarily not the whole window, but part of a window, what this would look like? And I mean, you can bring it in here and say, okay, how is this really that bold?
Has there been any discussion about the color? I mean, he's the person coming in, this is definitely what they're asking for.
Yes,
They're
sir.
not even willing to look at a shade?
We discussed that. I told him that it could be a possible concern of the commission. He has 8 other locations, several in Ohio, a couple in Pennsylvania, and they all use the same standard red. It's a chain. So
So this is their brand?
this is kind of their brand.
Now,
Now,
there's photographs of those other stores?
I did print on some. I can let you
So
see.
yeah, it's,
I saw them.
I will also say that I spoke with the owner briefly this morning. He is hoping to open by November the 4th. That is prior to the next planning commission meeting. So he would also be open to amending this application today to at least have the name be allowed on the windows and maybe come back for a different red if that's what the commission would rather see. But he definitely needs to have the name on the windows so he can actually open and have that name recognition there. If that's something the commission would like to go for on that.
I'm totally overstepping my bounds here, city engineer Jill Rhodes, but the thing that we approved, the thing that planning commission approved last year with the Redmonds is very red. And it's the Redmonds building,
Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier, yeah.
and that is very red.
Let me see that, because I don't see it that way.
I would rather have this.
That's the street view.
I would rather have this.
It's a lot brighter than the
And then-
picture shows.
I think if you hold those up to the pants that Jill is wearing, they're probably about the same color.
Yeah.
Is it, okay, if you're looking at balance, what's the color scheme that we use for this? What's the color palette that we use for that? Because that looks toned down compared to that.
And like I said, that's because of the
the street view,
the
I mean,
street
just,
view, yeah.
and then
It's
across the
brighter.
street, the vault was, the comment of the vault, I was just looking at that. And, so this is directly
Yeah, see, this is
across
a
the
lot
street, that right there
Yeah, that's
is
right.
the vault.
Looks like a
And those look like, I mean,
I'd like similar color to that. though.
if it's a similar
I
color
don't
to like
think
the
it,
vault
I'll be
awning,
surprised if that color is the
it's the
same
same
as
as
this.
that.
If that color, then it has some symmetry with the other look, and it doesn't
See, there's a stripe
contrast.
Well, I know the vault, just based on eyeball test, it is a fairly just a regular red. I mean, it's not a burgundy, it's not a darker, maybe shade of
Do
red.
you have
as
the
Redmond
color
has.
palette for
vault.
that color?
For the vault, I do not.
We have it
We
in the.
probably have it downstairs,
Probably
not
file.
with us.
I don't have any trouble with the window signage. I don't have any trouble with the business. In fact, a little history, it would be nice to add to the vitality of the downtown. I hate to would say no just to a color. It's without really looking into what color palette did we use for other similar approvals.
If that's your concern, why don't you make a motion approving it based upon the condition that they would go ahead and amend their application to change the red to that color palette that we would find in our records for the
That
vault.
we've used. I would
The
move.
vault, I think the vault may be, I'd like to see that because it might be brighter than this.
Well, I think the applicant's
I don't
willing
think
to
we
have
want
it.
to go brighter than this.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to go brighter, but I don't see that. I was down there. I looked.
I'm-
Nothing jumped out other than,
Yeah, my concern has always been the precedential value of what we made the Quick Mart people do. We made them mute that red because we didn't like the brightness of that red. And now if we permit another company to go and do this bright red, are we two-faced?
Well, and if I may,
May.
my answer to your question is no, because the Quick Mart is a backlit sign. So that was the other factor that's not here. This is just a simple wall sign, or a window sign, that is going to be, it's not going to be the lenses with the lighting in between, so it's
I
pretty
would,
different in my mind.
I would move to approve the window sign with the contingency that the color palette be the same as what we have approved for the other reds.
Can I ask a clarification question before there's a second
Certainly.
considered? Mayor, what if the color palette for those other examples are a brighter red than this one?
I can't imagine because I didn't see it. If it didn't jump out now, it won't jump out differently because we already got that in place.
It sounds as though the petitioner has offered a compromise through the staff. Let's approve the sign of the blue and then leave the,
We can come back and provide the
Yeah,
red.
that's what I'm saying.
You guys can
That
see
was
that
my
next meeting.
motion. However you said that is how I,
Okay, so your motion didn't have anything to do with the color palette then? Your motion
Correct.
then only dealt with the
well,
blue sign?
I didn't realize that was a motion, but if you'd like it to be.
Well, no, Mike made a motion.
yeah, I just need to
We're trying to
clarify.
clarify his motion.
Okay.
Your motion is clarified as just dealing with the blue signage.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a motion and now there's a second. Any further discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. McGarry,
Yes.
Mayor,
Yes,
Mrs. Mahan,
Yes.
Mr. Titterington,
Yes.
Mr. Wolke,
Yes.
Mr. Cappers.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
And then if staff would convey our concern about the red and see if he wants to offer any compromise and come back to us for approval on that portion of it at another meeting, that would be fine. In the meantime, if you'll do some research on the color palette of the
Yep.
vault, that'd be good too.
The vault and the red.
And the red.
Vault, red.
Thank you. Okay, the next matter to come before the commission is the proposed amendment to the zoning code to clarify the downtown riverfront overlay district. Staff have a report.
Yes, we do. Just when you thought you had the DRO down, we're going to propose a change. Essentially, if you read the report, what would happen is the change would come back and everything would follow the same process as a lot that's less than a half acre. So if this is approved, every DRO application would come twice before the planning commission. The first meeting would kind of be a reading, if you will, where it's read, and then notifications would go out to the surrounding property owners, who would then have the chance to attend the second required public hearing meeting to hear the voice of the citizens, as well as hear different recommendations. A recommendation of planning commission would be determined at that meeting and forwarded to city council, who would then have 5 days to act upon it. If they choose to not act upon it, then it is approved. So it is a more streamlined approach. That's kind of what we intended the DRO to be in the first place. Staff would make recommendations of the proposed language, and they were written by the law director. So,
I don't have any problem with the proposed language and the amendment. I do have a question. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this overlay district, and in particular in the fact that the discussion we had before in the Partners in Hope building down there, which is an overlay district. We approved that because there's variances in the setbacks and the parking, and then there was a real question as to what happens if they left, and went in for some other use, and it became a commercial use, and we needed to go ahead and have different parking and different setbacks. Would they have to tear down the building, for instance, because it no longer complies? And I still haven't heard a real good response to that.
I think the response we received from Grant is that the building would stay, but then the other items that contribute to the building, if it was signage, different items such as parking, then a new DRO would be applied for by the new occupant of that building or owner of the building.
And they would have to, it wasn't yes, he definitely said that the building is there, the building, if the building was approved to be built under the guidelines of the DRO, the building is the building. If a different use came in and they wanted to vary from the conditions or the requirements of the underlying zoning district, then that would have to stand on its own as a new DRO application. So certainly, if somebody decided they wanted to tear down the building and start over again, I guess if the business plan works, they could do that, but they'd still be subject to a DRO application. They are not, however, grandfathered for uses. The DRO application that is approved is only with that particular use.
Okay. Practically, how does this get applied? Because we don't
Well,
have.
yeah, and Tim didn't go over really the background any. It really relates to, first of all, this has been a work in progress. This is a brand new, unique process. And so our first oversized lot application, which actually consisted of 3 lots in one application, were related to the Hayner project. And because at least one of the lots was over the half-acre minimum, that kicked the whole DRO application to a recommendation from Planning Commission and an automatic review and vote by the council. What Grant has said is that anytime that happens, then you lose the streamlining because the state requirements related to rezonings and that whole process kicks in automatically. That is only when it reaches the level of council that you cannot modify the timelines, the public hearing guidelines, the public notices, the whole thing, when it goes to the council. The concern was that, okay, we have this practical application of the DRO process that we had just put in place. It was a fairly simple application. The support, even though there was no discussion except publicly and as part of the committee and as part of the public hearing, that this was any kind of controversial thing, but the Hayner in this case, could have been anybody, but the Hayner in this project was a fairly simple project, but it still it lost the streamlining and the whole, one of the objectives of the DRO process was to accelerate and to promote unique uses and a redevelopment of the downtown, because it slowed it down and it just became a standard, as if it was a standard rezoning. And so a number of folks said, at the council level, at least two at the council level, I won't say a number, said, okay, so how do we streamline this so council can still exercise its authority when it's concerned, and when it wants to slow things down and really have some discussion over complex projects without hurting simpler projects, if you will, even though they're over the half acre. And so what Grant said is, well, if you treat everything the same way, council still has that trigger mechanism where in that 5-day window, they can say, wait a minute, we want to review this, we want to bring it to our level, and then it will slow down the process and kick in the formal 30 days, public hearing, et cetera, et cetera.
But as I said before, I don't have any problem with the amendment as offered. I'm just asking esoterically some further explanation on the overlay district as a whole. For instance, if we granted an overlay district request and it had one zoning on it, and they, maybe it's not even possible, I don't know, because really there's an overlay district and then there's the zoning also. The zoning continues to be out there.
Correct.
So if they apply for overlay district, they still have to do the same uses in that zoning district. Is that right or not?
Yes,
Or
or,
in the overlay district, can they change the use as well?
unless that use matches what was currently approved in the DRO.
The DRO can approve different uses.
Okay,
than
so
that, yes.
that's good. So if they change the use in the overlay district, but the underlying zoning is still there, and then somebody wants to buy the building and use the building for what was in the underlying zoning, I would not think they have to have another overlay district.
They do not need to go back for another overlay district. It would
And
only be
yet
if
at
it
the
doesn't
same
match
time-
either of those two.
Then that building would not conform with the requirements of the side yards and parking in the underlying zoning.
Correct. That's correct.
And we just leave it that way?
Well, the alternative is to force them to
Tear down the
tear
building?
down the building.
Right.
And Grant's saying, no, we can't do that. We can
Okay.
certainly bring him back and have him at a future meeting to discuss that. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but
I took some.
we've had that conversation with him.
I took some comfort in the language of the ordinance that says, "The planning commission and/or the city council shall have the continuing authority to review and to approve or deny any further changes in buildings, grounds, easements, covenants, restrictions, and land uses to the approved site redevelopment plan for future effective plan approval, to assure that the development originally approved is not negatively affected by such changes." So it'd have to come back to us, but it's just still really confusing. Anyway.
It is, as you said, esoteric.
Yes.
I wrote that word.
Okay, we do have an amendment in front of us. I went off on a tangent, excuse me. Does anyone have any questions concerning the amendment as presented to the planning commission?
I guess since the current ordinance was a compromise, I'm a little surprised, excuse me, that council would be willing to make this change. I don't want to stand in the way of them being able to do it without a supermajority, so I'll support it, but I guess I'd be a little surprised if the council approves it.
Well, we're making a recommendation to them, and then they're going to have their say-so again. Any further discussion? We've got two items, whether or not we want to have a public hearing on this, and then whether or not we want to make the recommendation to council. So any further discussion on this?
So just to respond, Larry, we have had several DROs that have gone to the council. So this is not the only one, and I think, so they've had the opportunity to react, to review, to respond if they wanted to within the 5 days. And so they're getting a feel for the process as well. So I think the comfort level is higher than it was initially.
Okay, esoteric discussion, one more matter. We are now with Partners in Hope, okay? And if that underlying use is something different than what they're using it for, and in the back of their mind, they've got this side deal with a commercial entity that goes ahead and and I don't care what it is, but something that's zoned properly, but was not one of their uses, they could then go ahead and turn around and within 6 months sell it to another company, and we wouldn't have anything to say about it. Because we're not gonna go ahead and tear down the building, because we're not tearing down the buildings,
Right.
No, but they can't change the use without,
but the underlying zoning would go ahead and apply for that.
If it's a use that's approved in the overlying zoning, then within 6 months, I'm not sure what
So,
the timeframe, or 6 years
What I'm
even,
saying, this
so.
could be abused by somebody that comes in and says, I've got this side agreement with this commercial entity over here that wants to go and get a variance, but for parking and setbacks, but they're not gonna be permitted to do that. So why don't you, Charity, or somebody else, go and ask for the DROs, and then we'll buy it from you in 6 months, and we'll give you a nice hefty profit. I can see it being subject to abuse. Am I way out there, guys?
I think we will request Mr. Kerber. come
We tried to
to
be
future planning commission
optimistic, and a little bit optimistic. That one would not really be that optimistic of an example. I suppose it could happen, yes.
Okay.
There are those
All
out
right.
there that might abuse it.
And again, that's why we put provisions in place. I think there's conditions on there such as a fence had to be built because they couldn't meet the minimum side yard requirement buffer.
On
Things of that nature,
project.
yeah, on that project, yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions of staff concerning this issue? Any other comments from commission?
I'll make a motion that we not have a public hearing at this level.
second.
Any further discussion? Keep in mind, an affirmative vote is not to have a public hearing. Please call the roll.
Mayor,
Yes.
Mrs. Mahan,
Yes.
Mr. Titterington,
Yes.
Mr. Wolke,
Yes.
Mr. Cappers,
Yes.
Mr. McGarry.
Yes.
Motion is passed. Commission will not hold a public hearing.
Okay, does commission want to take any action on the recommendation of council?
I'll make a motion to recommend it to council.
I'll second.
There's a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Titterington,
Yes.
Mr. Wolke,
Yes.
Mr. Cappers.
Yes.
Mr. McGarry,
Yes.
Mayor,
Yes.
Mrs. Mahan.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a presentation by the City Beautification Committee. I see that they're not present, so we'll bypass that. Does staff have anything else to come before the commission?
Yes, we do. We have one item under,
I'm sorry.
Well, before we go to that one, though, Sue,
Yes.
what happened to the Beautification Commission?
I had discussed the date with Gareth, and I did not call her yesterday, and she's not here.
Do we not have anything to even look at or anything?
All we have is what you have in the budget. She was trying to get color, pictures of the flowers, which were to be blue, a dark red, and silver as much as possible.
Well, my concern is that, you know, we tried to re-stress and
Yes.
reiterate this process. It should have been last month probably that they came to us, so I don't know about their timing. We are knee-deep in budget development for 2019. I don't, having seen a preliminary budget request from them, they're not asking for anything over and above what they've asked for in the past years, so I'm not concerned about that, but one of the things that they were supposed to be sharing was some of their vision for the next few years, as well as the colors that they want to approve, want us to approve for ordering for the spring. And I believe last year at this time, they were concerned that they were going to get their order in too late.
Yes. I did check with her the date twice, but I did not call her back this week.
Okay, does staff have anything else to come before the commission?
yes, we do. We have one item that Jill would like to.
Is the lady in red going to talk?
Waist up, black. Dedication of right-of-way along Barnhart Road. We, I guess in 2014, right when I got here, there was an expansion going on at Speedway at Barnhart and West Market Street, State Route 55. And at that point, there was supposed to be a dedication of right-of-way, and there wasn't. Actually, the State Route 55, Barnhart and Fenner, the entire property is owned by Speedway. And so we actually were made aware of it by county. County had reviewed the replat, and then they kind of said, hey, this was never taken action. And so we went back to Speedway a couple weeks ago, and they said, yeah, we want to dedicate it. So that's essentially what it is. It's 0.310 acres of existing part in lot 6502. The new replat would be 3.74 acres. You have an attached replat. It is just asking you to accept the dedication of the right-of-way, as the replat is an administrative function because it's just combining two lots. So this is just a recommendation. We're requesting a recommendation from Planning Commission to council to dedicate the 0.310 acres of the part in lot 6502.
Just for clarification.
Yep.
This says the replat is considered a minor subdivision, does not require planning commission nor city council approval.
Correct.
So we're
The
just-
actual replat does not.
Oh, I see.
So the reason I'm standing here talking to you is the dedication of right-of-way requires planning commission and city council approval.
Thank you. Any questions of staff?
I'm maybe a little confused here.
Okay.
Are we saying that part of Barnhart Road is actually their property?
Yes.
Yeah, so as it exists in townships, there's a highway easement, there's a standard highway easement there. But as it exists in townships, that it's a standard highway easement, and then typically when they develop and they come into the city is when they dedicate the right-of-way to the city, exclusively to the city, so then it is taken off of their parcel total area.
Most rural properties, the title of the property goes up to the center of the road.
Yep.
Any other questions of staff? What you're requesting is a recommendation to council to go ahead and accept the dedication of the right-of-way.
Correct.
Commission want to take any action?
I'll move that we recommend approval of the dedication to council.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Wolke? Mr. Wolke?
Yes.
Mr. Cappers?
Yes.
Mr. McGarry?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahan?
Yes.
Mr. Titterington?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Just lastly, in front of you are the sessions for the planning and zoning workshop coming up in December, on December 7th. If you would like to attend, just let us know and we will get you registered.
Thank you. Anything else come before the commission?
Nothing further, thank you.
Commission have anything else they want to discuss? Any other esoteric issues they want to discuss?
Bill Troy. Move for adjournment.
Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you.